we're going to show a film that is a documentary, famous documentary about the Rolling Stones tour in 1969. And we had a discussion, Charlene and I, and various people that have put this thing on about how we should organise the evening, if you like. And I thought that it was important that something should be said prior to people seeing this film. It's a funny thing about documentaries. People see documentaries, and because it's a film, in some way or other, they tend to accept that what the film is saying is, if you like, the gospel truth or some uniquely authoritative view on an event. And I think the Maisels who made this film, very famous documentary filmmakers, would be the first to agree that it's only a partial view of an amazing event, an event that saw people killed and many people going to the hospital, and just a chaotic event that the Rolling Stones were involved in. And so that's the first thing I want to say, is that this is a film about an event. It's a film that was made by people who arrived at the event and had only been with the Rolling Stones for a few days before it, so they didn't necessarily have much of an idea about what was going on. Very few people in the Rolling Stones' whole scene had an overview of what goes on a major tour where there's 80, 90 people involved in those days. Now maybe 200 or 300 people. But one of the people that does have an overview is the tour manager. And one of the jobs, if you like, of a tour manager is to be that kind of person, to be the person that not only knows what's going on with the lead singer's throat, because he's got a sore throat, and really what he should do is have a towel around his neck and sip lemon and honey and not talk to anybody, for example, for 48 hours, because if he doesn't do that, then he won't be able to sing. And you have to be the kind of person that can persuade somebody who is a very kind of dynamic and public person. Look, you can't talk to anyone, you can't do any interviews, you can't talk to anyone, you've just got to relax, and maybe we'll be able to get you on stage in Madison Square Garden in 2 days' time. Otherwise, we're going to have to cancel it, with massive expenses. But at the same time as that's going on, then there's all kinds of subplots and psychodramas, especially around the Rolling Stones, which is a complete fucking circus. I want us to be informed about all these things. So when you see this film, one thing that you'll notice is that there's a kind of strange combination of people appearing in this film, some of whom definitely look like they came from San Francisco in 1968, 69, 67, and others of whom look like they just stepped out of The Sopranos, which they did, though were mafia guys who at the time were trying to take over the Rolling Stones. Now, there's some other complications going on. I'm just trying to set the stage for this film for you, so you understand, like, maybe the film will be a bit more meaningful for you. Prior to the 1969 tour of America, the Rolling Stones hadn't played for nearly 3 years in public. So we did a show in London in Hyde Park, which is like the Central Park equivalent in New York. In London, Hyde Park, this massive park, and we did a show there with Blind Faith, and Mick and Marianne Faithfull and all various people came to see it, and Mick really liked it and talked to me about the possibility of doing a Rolling Stones concert in the park. I said, yeah, we can do a concert with anyone. The Pink Floyd had done one, and the Stones wanted to do one. There was about 150,000 people at the Blind Faith show. So we got that together. It was a great success. Maybe 500,000 people were in the park. No one was injured. When I think back on it, it's quite extraordinary, really. The medical facilities were 2 little old ladies from the Red Cross, and if you were sick, they gave you a cup of tea and a biscuit. That was it. That was the medical facilities, basically. There was, I think, a St John's ambulance that was on call that could be got, but if we wanted to get it, we had to send somebody across the park on about a 1.5 mile run. This was long before the days of mobile telephone, you know, cell phones and stuff. And it was all very genteel and relaxed, and a couple of people got sunstroke because it was a hot day, but apart from that, there was nothing happened. Nobody got arrested. And then after the show, we distributed large garbage bags for people to collect rubbish, and the people that went to the show all collected the rubbish. There was literally a mountain of rubbish the size of this whole room, bigger, and that people had very thoughtfully collected, and so the park was cleaned up, and it was a turning point really in the experience of the Rolling Stones, because prior to that concert, the Rolling Stones had basically been persecuted by the British police. Brian was constantly being busted, Keith had been busted, Mick had been busted, and they were kind of treated like they were some kind of enemy of I don't know, you know, the state. And the police deliberately had no, I mean, I talked to Scotland Yard, who's like the kind of FBI of Great Britain, really, you know, the London police. It's called Scotland Yard. I talked to them about policing this event. They absolutely refused to do it. They didn't want to have police at it. The reason they didn't want to have police at it was quite simple. They hoped that it would be a complete disaster and it would be a failure, you know, there'd be lots of, who knows what, rioting, fighting, whatever, fucking in the bushes, who knows, smoking drugs, you know, so that they could, if you like, use it to demonise the Rolling Stones. Whereas what happened was, because Brian had died of, what, 4 or 5 days before the actual event, and it turned into a kind of a memorial for Brian, there was this massive outpouring of sympathy, and literally 500,000 people came, all brought their joints and all sat in the sun in a very English kind of way, and everyone behaved themselves, got stoned. The Stones played, they were dreadful, but it didn't matter, everyone was just, you know, delighted to see him, and Mick Taylor was kind of introduced to the crowd, and it was all a lovely thing. So thereafter, I was asked to be their tour manager for America. That was how I actually joined that stable of lunatics. But bless them, we came to America, and as I say, the Rolling Stones hadn't played for 3 years, and what used to happen with the Rolling Stones was the Rolling Stones would come on, somebody would go, you know, ladies and gentlemen, the Rolling Stones, everyone would go mad, basically. They'd come on stage, start playing, they'd get 3/4 of the way through the first number, 3,000 people would charge the stage, the band would rush for the exit, and that was it was all over. Sometimes I think the shortest one was like 3.5 minutes or something, they didn't even finish the first song. So they weren't really used to what happened to them when they came to America, although they loved it. Because they came to America, and there'd been a kind of sea change in the music business, and people were now listening to music. Music had all of a sudden become, in a sense, of being kind of become orchestral. It wasn't a 2.5 minute excuse anymore for teenagers to scream. The Beatles had made music much more kind of sophisticated, if you like, and and there were people like the Doors and all kinds of people like that making sophisticated music. So the Rolling Stones were faced with this kind of quite unique thing of having an audience that listened to them. So that was a challenge. The other thing that they had, which was equally a challenge, I think that's my phone. Turn it off, someone. I think it is actually. The other thing that was different for them was when the Rolling Stones, say they played in a place like this, obviously bigger, would be like a cinema. So this microphone would be run through the loudspeakers that normally you broadcast the soundtrack from the film on. And the amplifiers would be in the back, the drums would be there, and that was it. Mick could be singing through what the films went through. So as you can imagine, the standard of reproduction, you know, it was just dreadful. But it didn't matter because nobody was fucking listening anyway. Everyone was, the girls were all wetting themselves and screaming and yelling, and you know, it was just complete mayhem. But it did matter when the whole ambience, if you like, changed, and people started listening. You know, when people listen, what's going on with the sound and everything. Stones for the 1969 tour did something they'd never done before, which was they had their own sound and lights. So the same sound system went from one gig to the next. Now it doesn't, I mean, it sounds like nothing nowadays, everybody does that. But in 1969, believe me, that was completely revolutionary and quite unusual, to say the least, you know. Then various other bands started doing the same thing, like the Doors, like the Grateful Dead, people like that. But anyway, so that, we're in America, they're playing through their own equipment, which allows a certain kind of consistency. People are listening to them. This film that you're about to watch captures the band at that time, and you know, I've been a lucky man. I was with the Rolling Stones at a time period where I think creatively that they were at their height. Mick Taylor added he added the dimension to the Rolling Stones that had been missing since Brian went on the missing list in 1967 from basically taking too many drugs. But Brian was a brilliant musician who could play anything, you know. He's a wonderful bottleneck guitar player, but equally brilliant on dulcimer, brilliant on saxophone, all kinds of things. You can pick up anything and play it, amazing guy. But then he lost all that and became a kind of catatonic wreck in the corner. Mick Taylor came along, kind of revitalised everything, and they were playing wonderful music. And then in the middle of all this, there was a huge storm, really, you could say, about the price of tickets. Something that's haunted the Rolling Stones their whole life, and to this day haunts them. Can I ask for a bottle of water, please? If anyone's got one? Thank you. Thanks. So the problem was that the Rolling Stones were charging $8 for their tickets in 1969, yeah, and that was considered a complete rip-off. It wasn't actually, because I mean, like the Doors charged $7.50 for their tickets, but anyway, $8 for the Rolling Stones was considered. Thank you, my friend. Lovely. You're welcome. Give him a hand. Yay! Looks a bit fancy for me. Saratoga, I thought that was a racetrack. It's horse piss. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah. I'm only kidding, it's lovely. Yeah, so the Rolling, you know, this film captures the Rolling Stones at a very special moment in their kind of evolution as a band, and it's very good to look at it, if only because it just shows you how they're not the band they used to be. Let's put it like that, to be kind about it. But the ticket prices were a massive scandal at $8, which is kind of ironic when you think about it. And now, for the first time, the Rolling Stones are on tour in America and have done a tour where they didn't sell out. Yeah, they didn't sell out because they were fucking greedy, and they put ticket prices at $600, and no one wants to pay $600 for a ticket. So they had to lower the ticket price to $80 in order to get people to the hall. And several of their shows didn't sell out, which is a first for the Rolling Stones, and something that made me feel a bit sad, because it's a reflection on the level of skill of the people that are advising the Rolling Stones. And one of the great problems of major bands is who they choose to listen to. And Mick's always had a big problem listening to anyone. But currently he's listening to a woman. Well, that's okay, you know, women are the equivalent of men in many ways. But she happens to be an accountant, a tax accountant, and knows fuck all about the music business. She ran a folk club in Cambridge, Massachusetts. This is the extent of her knowledge of the music business. So yeah, the Rolling Stones went on tour and put the top ticket price at $1,500, which is an obscenity. I don't know about an absurdity, it's an obscenity. And yeah, ticket prices at $600, and needless to say, nobody wanted to take them up on the offer. So I think it's a bit sad, you know. And I'm pleased that with the Grateful Dead, at least, there was always a specific consciousness at work in terms of ticket prices, and one of the things that I'm going to talk about after this film is obviously what's in the film, etc., 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 but also some of the differences between the Rolling Stones and the Grateful Dead, and it's been a great privilege and a pretty amazing trip for me to go from working for one band as a tour manager, and then in the midst of the huge disaster that was Altamont, going from working for the Rolling Stones to working for the Grateful Dead. And well, the Grateful Dead didn't hire me because I was, the good-looking equivalent of Gary Cooper. They hired me because they were very interested in how the Rolling Stones managed to organise their affairs so that they made money. Because the Grateful Dead had been in existence then, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. They'd never made any money, although they'd gone through lots of it. There was never any money around, and so they were interested to know, and I'll go into that in some detail after we've had a look at this film. So just bear in mind that you'll see all these odd people, and I think what I'm going to do is I might even just point out at certain moments in the film who people are, because you see some people, for example, there's one person who's talking upon behalf of the Rolling Stones, right? He's got no authority to talk on behalf of the Rolling Stones whatsoever. He looks like Goldafini, or whatever his name is, the guy that was the main actor in the Sopranos, and he was actually a representative of one of the New York families, and was actually trying to take over the Rolling Stones at the time, and he's standing in the office of Mel Belli, who represented various organisations, not least of which was, I think they were called the Sons of Columbus, some strange, a little friendly society that dealt with its enemies ruthlessly. Anyway, it would be good for you to know who that person is, and it would be interesting. There's another little telling point where a very straight lawyer from Mel Belli's office makes a comment about all the people that are already leaving all over America to come to this free concert. And he said, yeah, there's hundreds of thousands of them, they're like lemmings. And I always thought that was a very kind of telling comment, about these people. So the police refused, just like at Hyde Park, there were no police. I spent a lot of time at this show trying to get the police involved. When I say there were no police, there were maybe 10 highway patrolmen, 4 or 5 people from the sheriff's department, and then various agents from the San Francisco office of the FBI. But none of them did a thing. They were all useless. The Rolling Stones, through the mafia connection, had maybe 20 not retired, but on holidaying members of the New York City Police Department, a narcotics squad. Yeah, thugs to a man. All they wanted to do was sniff coke and sit around in hotel rooms playing poker. Very strange bunch of guys. Well, all of this is stuff we could talk about, and it's also stuff that's covered in this magnificent book that you'll see here. I'm selling it up the back there. I wrote it, unlike Keith Richards, who didn't write his book. I keep trying to tell people an autobiography is something that somebody writes. A biography is something that somebody else writes, not the subject of the book. But anyway, Keith's autobiography is not an autobiography, it's an official biography, and lots of it's rubbish. And I can tell you right now, his son hates it, so does his ex-Mrs. Anita, and several of his friends are very upset about it because he could have written a great book and he didn't. So I spent a lot of time writing a book about the Grateful Dead and the band and Janis, Joplin and various people that I work with. And I'm selling it here, and thank you. I want to thank Charlene and the people from Handy Jam for the opportunity to do that, and congratulate them on a nice evening. And now we'll watch a weird film, and afterwards, please, if you've got questions about the film, then of course I'm more than happy to answer them. And anyway, during the evening, I'll be sitting underneath the exit sign up there. So when you go on the way to the toilet, you could buy a copy of my book and then sit in the toilet for half an hour reading it. If you want, it might help you work everything out, you know what I mean? Anyway, let's do the film and we'll continue. The film's finished. Thanks very much. His book doesn't mention it at all, and so on. They subscribe to the theory if you don't talk about things, they'll somehow, disappear. My own attitude is that, yeah, sometimes you do things that turn out really badly, and you're responsible for it, so you have to deal with it. So immediately after this show, the Rolling Stones left America because there was threat of massive lawsuits and God knows what else, and I stayed to clear up the mess. And the day after this show, I went on my own to a meeting with all 12 presidents of the Hells Angels chapters in California, who were not very happy, as you can imagine. And that was a very fraught and difficult meeting, but it had to be done. And in life, there are things that have to be done. So I sometimes wonder, that was a long time ago. That's 1969. Have we learned anything? And I sometimes think we have, and at other times I think we haven't. And something that made me think that we haven't. The other day I was at a friend's house and the friend said to me, listen, I've got to show you something. So it's a film clip from Coachella, this year's Coachella, just a few days ago. I said, oh great, yeah, I'd like to see that. So he shows this clip of a naked man. And there's like 4 cops standing around looking at him. And the guy is obviously, off his tits on acid or whatever. He's completely stoned. And the cops are dealing with this guy. And they're trying to get him, he had a kind of, how would you describe it, like a wizard's uniform of some kind, it looked like a wizard's uniform. Anyway, they're trying to get him to put this on. And the guy's completely, it belonged to him, he'd taken it off, and he was so completely out of it, they didn't stand a chance of getting him to put clothes on. He was, he was whipping around Jupiter. So the cops are trying to do this, and the guy's not responding, and the cops are getting more uptight, and it's all, so utterly predictable. Anyway, it ends up, the cops throw the guy on the ground. This is a naked man. Hundreds of people are watching this. They throw him on the ground, they taser him, not once, but like 20 times on the ground, before they handcuff him behind his back, and he's dragged off, arrested, and that just made me feel so dispirited. I would say this, the responsibility for the safety and security of audiences lies with bands and bands management. When the Grateful Dead, the responsibility for people's safety, whether it's in a little place like this or in at Altamont or at Watkins Glen where we had 720,000 people, lies with bands and their management. And one of the things I would say about Coachella is in situations where you get people completely fucked up, out of their heads on whatever the drug is, it's the responsibility of the organisers to be able to deal with that. Police, unfortunately, aren't equipped to deal with naked people on LSD. They're equipped to deal with burglars and people who go too fast down the road in the car, but they're not equipped for that. But organisers of Coachella and places like that should have teams of people that are ready to intervene in those situations. And I'll tell you a little story about that, because the Grateful Dead we were very, 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 very concerned always that if people were having, bad trips and problems, that we were the people who were best equipped to deal with this, not the police. And at one gig, I think it was in Seattle, I'm not exactly sure, I'm pretty sure it was in Seattle. There was 12,000 people, the band is playing, everything's happening. And I was standing on the side of the stage, got the money, everything's cool, I'm getting high. I notice a guy, he's completely naked down kind of near the front of the audience. There was a big gap around him. And he's got like 12 cops there, all in full riot gear. It's like the Seattle Police Department riot squad. They're all got their nightsticks out, and they're all looking at this naked guy who's lying on his back on the ground, kicking his arms and legs in the air like a kind of frustrated little baby in a pram and screaming, I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying, like this. So that's our problem. We've got to intervene. So, but Owsley and I ran down, the bear who made lots of trips, and anyway, that's another story, but the bear and I ran down into the audience to deal with this situation. And I was kind of standing there looking at it thinking, okay, what am I going to do here? Got to get through the cops. And Bear rushed through the cop's legs somehow, and all of a sudden grabbed hold of the guy's head. And the guy's going, I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying. It's just chaos. And whispered something in his ear, and the guy immediately was cool. And we found his clothes, and we got him dressed, and told all the cops, it's all right, you don't have to beat the fuck out of him, he's all right, he's harmless, you know, don't worry, he just had a crisis, got it all calmed down. And afterwards, went backstage, and I was sitting smoking a joint with Bear, and I said to him, what did you say to that guy? And Bear said, I told him, die, motherfucker. So, the psychedelic psychology, if you like, can be brought to bear in situations like that, and sometimes work, you know, whereas if a policeman said that to you when you were in that position, you wouldn't be, you know, you'd be mortified. So, anyway, the responsibilities for people's safety does belong to bands, and sometimes people get it wrong, and this film that you saw here is a classical example of how a variety of little things turn into major problems of like epic proportions. For example, you go to a show now, you go to a rock and roll show that's an outdoor rock and roll show, the stage is usually 8-10 foot high, so there's 30, 40, 50, 60, 80,000 people can see who's on it. And there's big, you know, video screens so you can see close-ups of whoever it is that you're watching. But no one can get on the stage. It's too high for somebody to actually jump up on it. If you notice, the stage there at Altamont was lower than this stage. It was like, hang on, there. It came to there. So there was, you know, the Grateful Dead, well, they didn't play, but there was Santana, Jefferson Airplane, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, the Flying Burrito Brothers, the Rolling Stones, playing in the middle of 300,000 people, you know, on a stage that was about 2 foot high. It was ridiculous and totally inadequate to the task. And there were just little things like that that all added up. The stage was meant to be put on the top of a hill at another site. We bought it from the other side that we couldn't play it. And instead of putting it at the top of the hill, the fuckwits that organised where it was supposed to go, excuse me, put it at the bottom of the hill. If they put it at the top of the hill, everyone could have seen. No one would have had to press forward. No one could have been pressed forward, because if you're pressing forward towards a stage that's on top of a hill, it means you've got to press forward uphill. It doesn't work like that. If it's downhill, then it's easy for a mass of people to press, and then the people that are right in the front, right up against that stage, as you saw, were slowly being crushed, and speakers were falling over, all that stuff. Anyway, so range of different problems that over the years, hopefully the music business has learned to deal with, but we still haven't really learned to deal with people that have acid problems, you know, and drug problems at concerts, and we probably haven't learned to deal with people who've got drug problems in life, let alone at rock and roll shows. But my book, just to tell you one thing about my book analyses this particular show in great detail as to why it was such a chaotic and you know, very, very, very scary event. And there are a lot of reasons for that, which I don't really want to go into here, because I think it'll spoil your enjoyment of the book. The book's, it's easy to write a book about rock and roll where all that happens is everyone takes lots of drugs and fucks everybody else. I mean, we all know that goes on, but you can't really sustain a 300-page book with that. It would be nice if there was slightly more information, you know, real information. So my book doesn't actually diss anybody. It's not rude about anybody except Bill Graham, but that's another story. Everybody's treated with respect and kindness, and I try and tell the true story about what happened at this particular event. And then the book goes on to talk about the Grateful Dead, and the two bands represent the two kind of polarities, the North Pole and the South Pole, if you like, of the music business. Both huge bands. One an English band that's kind of very showy show band, kind of show busy, very concerned about their status, their image, and having #1 records and all that kind of stuff. And the other band didn't give a fuck about their image, didn't care about, you know, selling records, which they never really achieved, you know. And I mean, I can remember when I joined the Greatful Dead, the first thing I said to Garcia was living in his house. I said, man, the photographs of the Grateful Dead are a fucking joke, man. You know, they're just, this is nowhere. We're going to have photographs, you know. We need, no, we don't do photographs. No, hold on, Jerry. Like, if there's a story in the newspaper about you're coming to some town to play, the newspaper's going to want a picture of you. Yeah, but we don't do pictures. You know, it took me 18 months to persuade the Grateful Dead that we needed to do a picture of the Grateful Dead. It's that famous one, Bob Sideman took it, where Pigpen's got a kind of US flag cloth kind of cap on his head backwards. But you'll notice from the picture, everybody's dressed like kind of, I don't know, kind of contemporary version of grunge. They all look completely funky. Nobody's had a wash. They all look like they just got out of bed. And they deliberately made it look as kind of funky and non-glam, for, you know, for commercial photography as was humanly possible. I mean, the funny thing about the Grateful Dead is that by default they made the most wonderful decisions. Nobody in the Grateful Dead ever wanted to make a decision. They're a bunch of fucking cowards on that level. I mean, they didn't even want to play at Altamont when they may, I don't know, but may have saved the day. They didn't want to play because the vibe was wrong. But I mean, they didn't want to have photographs taken. No, we don't do that. I wanted to have individual photographs. Forget it. No way. They weren't going to do it. Anyway, they had this fucking picture taken, and it became a kind of iconographic picture of how a band should, you know, have its portrait taken, because they were so obviously like reluctant and looked very sulky and kind of moody and unhappy, and that became a whole genre in itself. It was, you know, a way of taking pictures of bands. And a lot of things, somebody asked me, I was doing a show in Connecticut the other day, and somebody asked me about recording. And they said, well, what was it? You know, how come, you know, the Grateful Dead let people record their shows and everything? You know, was that like, you know, kind of executive decision? You know, did you have a big meeting and talk about this? Or how was that kind of arranged or arrived at, that decision? And I said, well, as far as I remember, because I was there when it happened, that doesn't guarantee that you remember things around the Grateful Dead, but I was there, and basically what happened was everybody was fucking lazy. We were talking about it, and we went, well, you know, should we get the crew to go into the audience and like take their tape recorders off it? And everyone went, no, man, you know, we're all getting high. We don't want to do that. Fuck it, you know what I mean? And everyone went, does it really matter if they record it? And then I think Rock Scully, who used to handle all the business with Warner Brothers, was going, yeah, well, it's going to affect our record sales. And everyone looked at him and went, what record sales? We don't sell records, Rock, you know what I mean? And everyone, oh, fuck it doesn't matter, you know? So that was a kind of decision that was taken by default that, you know, is now held up by the kind of Harvard Business School as some kind of wonderfully enlightened business decision that the Grateful Dead made, and it wasn't at all. It was just a kind of default position based on the central theory of Grateful Dead existence in those days was as little hassle as possible. We just don't need the aggravation or the hassle, and it served them well. And I just would like to say about the Grateful Dead, who I love and still consider myself a member of that distant family, their desire not to be pigeonholed, not to, you know, the desire of Jerry not to be a leader, not to be this kind of oracle that pronounced on things where millions of people decided that was the way to go. I mean, for example, I hate that expression, what would Jerry think? Does my head in to see it. And I'm sure that Garcia, if he could see it, maybe he does see it, would be horrified too. Because half the people in the Grateful Dead would turn around and say, well, who gives a fuck what Jerry thinks, for a start? I mean, Jerry thinks whatever Jerry thinks, you know what I mean? And secondly, Jerry was famous. Okay, how can I explain this? as wonderful as he was on stage, as dominant and powerful and controlling in terms of the band, where that music was going to go, how it was going to be, on every level, it was Jerry's band. I mean, as soon as he wasn't there, you could see what it turned into. On every level, he was in control, musically. As soon as you took Garcia away from music, and I know, I mean, I looked after the man for 4 years, saved his life twice. He was hopeless. He didn't even know when to change his fucking socks. I used to say, Jerry, your feet stink. He used to wear cowboy boots, you know, in those days. And I said, man, your feet, I can smell your feet. And he'd kind of go, oh, you'd be sitting there playing the guitar, you know, in some hotel room or something. I said, man, have you changed your socks? I used to go and buy socks for him. I go and get some socks and say, look here, man, you know, like, next time you have a bath, change your socks. He was funky as fuck, you know. And he just didn't think about those things, you know what I mean? All he thought about was the survival of the Grateful Dead, and bless him, you know, I mean, he kept a lot of people in bread and wine, Jerry, for many, 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 many years, bless his memory, you know. But I did have the pleasure of telling him one time where he said to me, well, you work for me. I said, you don't fucking pay me enough. This isn't a job, Jerry. The only reason I do this is because I love you. You don't pay me enough. So I just want to say the Rolling Stones never paid me. They still owe me the money to this day. And for the 4 years I worked for the Grateful Dead and made them millions, I paid myself, I could pay myself what I wanted. I paid myself $200 a week. So one of the reasons for that was not total, you know, disinterest and altruism. It was because I wanted to be in a kind of morally strong position to talk to people about how money should be divided. You know, it's not, you can't really tell the Grateful Dead, look, you've got to all live on $200 a week if you are on $5,000 a week. So the Grateful Dead, when I joined them, were in a terrible state. They had no money. They were in desperate difficulties financially, maybe $600,000-$700,000 in debt. And you know, in order to survive, we had to make money, and we had to pay off those debts. And so the agreement was that everybody would live on a very small amount of money, and so we did. And I'm pleased that that is what happened. And for many years now, I haven't been involved directly in the music business. Indirectly, I have, and I've been writing. And my next book's going to be called Sex for the Over 80s. I look like I've got an audience here for it, so just kidding. I'm writing. This is a book that I wrote about the music business, having read hundreds of books about the music business, most of which I found an insult to my intelligence, and most of them rather boring. So I hope you find my book of interest. And what I'd like to do is, because people do have questions and do like to ask questions, and as long as it's not about my sex life, you're welcome to ask questions. We've got more than 2 minutes. This is Handy Jam, the flexible time organisation.
All these guys came a long way.
Well, nobody fucking came further than I did. I came from Australia. So, who's got the most intelligent question in the room? This is the question. Would somebody, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a question, somebody might like to make an observation about the film or whatever. Feel free to, you know, say something, please.
Glad you did it.
Well, thank you. This old Oppo from the music business who's still alive. He's still young. He's only 68, but he'll get there. He worked with the Who and all kinds of people. And yeah. No, not one. There's a question. Oh, I was going to say it. A highly intelligent audience and not one question. What? I must be at Harvard.
In all your experiences working with all these different bands, what is the one big regret that you have that you never got to accomplish?
Well, the God's honest truth is I've never lived in regret. I've made some super fucking stupid mistakes. You know what I mean? And they happen. You know, I'm not perfect. I'm just another human being. So, you know, the idea, you know, that you don't make mistakes is absurd. We all make mistakes. But I don't live in regret. I mean, I think, you know, you make mistakes. I do believe you've got to deal with it. You know, you break the law. If you do it bad enough, they're going to send your ass to jail. Get on with it. You know, that's what happens. And but I mean, let me think. What would I have liked to have done? I haven't got a clue. What I could have been gay and married Elvis. I don't know, man. You know, it's like everything that I wanted to do in the music business, I did only because I only worked with people that I loved and wanted to work with, and I loved them for their music. There was a time a few years back when I was complete. Well, okay. Why is he in hospital? Oh, he had a heart attack. Right. Okay. So who's the band? Who's the band? Finally, they said, "Don't worry about the band, man. We'll pay you $10,000 a month, and we'll give you this, we'll give you that," which was a lot of money then. No, I want to know the band. So finally, they said, "It's Black Sabbath." And I went, I wouldn't fucking work for Black Sabbath, man, for $1 million a month. I don't know, fucking 10,000. You know what I mean? It's like, and they went, "Why? What's the problem? You know what I mean? It's just a band. You know, the problem is I'd have to listen to that shit." So my whole life in the music business, I've been very lucky. I've always listened to stuff that I loved, and I can't complain. People have been very nice to me. You know what I mean? I'm alive. There's plenty of people in the music business who died young, including tour managers. But I did make some smart choices when it came to drugs. I know the drugs that kill you, and I know the drugs that get you high. And this is a core issue that all the people of my generation have been through. We paid a heavy price for our knowledge.
Was it Richard Cole who rang you?
No. No, he's an old mate. Yeah, he's talking about Led Zeppelin's tour manager. No, it wasn't. No, he's an agent, actually. Yeah, no.
Is there a band or artist that you ever wanted to work with that you never got the chance to?
Well, I mean, there were a few, but not really. I mean, I would have loved to have looked after the Flying Burrito Brothers, because I just loved their music early on. They were wonderful, you know. But, you know, I mean, the music business, you do what, you know, you do what's available to you at the time, and then you look back on it and you feel good about it or bad about it, whatever. But, I mean, you can't, you know, work with every band on the planet. So, you feel good about the ones you work with. But, you know, I mean, I think regret is such a lame kind of position to take on things. You know, I didn't work with certain bands, but it's not regrettable. You know what I mean? I mean, I regret that my grandmother died. You know what I mean? I was very close to her. That's a regretful thing. Not working for somebody, or, you know, not making $1 million or not getting a gold record. These are just, you know, the twos and fro's of life in the fast lane or the last lane. Yeah, so I don't live in regret. Good enough.
Yeah, what type of input did you have when the bands were creating new music?
None. I always loved music and had nothing to do whatsoever with its creation, if you like, other than making sure all the necessary ingredients were there for them to, like, bake a cake.
So they would play it for you, and you would give them an opinion?
When I first met the Grateful Dead, the first thing they said was, "Oh, we play Rolling Stones. We love the Rolling Stones. We play Rolling Stones numbers all the time." I went, you know, great, okay. I was sick to death of the fucking Rolling Stones, actually. But anyway, yeah, we love them. We're going to play. You know, we can play. So they were in the rehearsal hall. So okay, yeah, we'll play you some. So they played Little Red Rooster. You know. Well, I wasn't impressed. I mean, you know what I mean? The Grateful Dead used to play lots of Rolling Stones songs. The Rolling Stones, as you can well imagine, would never play a Grateful Dead song. And they're like chalk and cheese, you know?
Right.
One last question, because I can see Charlene is hovering. The wicked witch of the watch is here, and time is pressing, so we must...
I don't want it, but we gotta have
Hang
a
on.
I'm just wondering, since you lived through this movie, when you see it again, are you reminiscing, or are you...
I'll tell you what, it really disturbs me. I hate seeing it, actually. It was a very, 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 very heavy day. I mean, not too many people go to a rock and roll show and see a murder happening, you know, well, 15 feet in front of them. And you know, I had blood all over me. I went and saw the guy's body, helped put the guy's body on a stretcher. You know, not nice. And I mean, the amazing thing is, then I went up, and I should have pointed it out, but I went to, in the film, you see me talking to Mick, and I'm telling Mick, the guy had a gun, they've stabbed him, get the fuck off the stage now. And Mick's going, no, we've got to finish the set. He was a ballsy guy, man. A ballsy guy. It takes something to have your tour manager tell somebody, you know, he had a gun, he's been stabbed to death. You've got to leave the stage and say, no, we've got to finish this set. He was right. I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, they'd never have got out there alive if they tried to leave at that stage. But very, very brave and ballsy guy. So what I'll say to you finally is this: look, I'm going to be at the back on your way to the toilet, preferably on the way back after you've washed your hands. Come and shake hands, say hello. I'm sitting in the corner there. I've got some books for sale. I'm happy to sign them for you. And any questions that you've got, come and talk to me, and I'm happy to answer them. And thanks very much for being here. Thank you. Thanks, John.